Todd, welcome to the Meat Mafia podcast. Pleasure to have you down here.
Thanks for having me. Glad it worked out.
Appreciate you making the trip in from Nashville too.
Yeah. I mean, I love Austin, so I don't get down here enough, but happy to be here.
I feel like you'd fit in well here in this city too.
I mean, I was real close to moving.
Yeah.
We were pretty much dead set until 4 months out, and then we quick switch to Nashville, but they're very similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were saying we have the New York City connection where we kind of like overlapped and we're both there. And I remember when cold plunging started to become a bigger thing in 2020, I was all in and was trying to find a gym to get a cold plunge at.
Tough.
I couldn't find anywhere in the city. I think there was like maybe one Equinox that had a plunge.
Well, the hidden gem is the Russian bathhouse on the Lower East Side.
Spot. Oh,
That's your spot, isn't it?
I would go to the Wall Street one. Did you ever go to Spa 88 or
No.
Wall Street Baths? But it's either the East Side one or the Wall Street one.
The East Side one is like OG Russian bathhouse.
Yeah.
Whereas back in the day, I don't know when this happened, there were two owners. They were both Russian. They got in a fight. And you could have like, I don't know the guy's name, let's say Eddie's membership, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Or if you were friends with the other guy, you came Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. And there was no crossing over.
Yeah.
Like that's how so it was like
They use the same facility.
Same facility, yeah. Same.
That's wild.
They just had like a huge falling out, but now it's normal and there's day passes. But it's like in the basement, the cold plunge is like massive.
Yeah.
There's like 6 saunas. It's like 240 degrees.
Yeah.
It's insane.
It's grungy, and it's all like Russians from Brooklyn and like a couple based
Yeah.
Americans that are there, and that's it.
Yeah.
The first time I went there, my buddy from the Ukraine brought us there, and I was like, Russian bathhouse, what the hell is this? And there was a guy that was there that looked exactly like Putin. He was just like holding cord. He was all tattooed
Yeah.
up. He had like two like
was in
23-year-olds, and I was like, I'm not fucking with that guy at all.
It's also like everyone's. If you're in there, like you've been there a lot. You're like a hardcore, spitz. Like you're going in there all the time, and you feel very out of place because you're like,
Really?
I don't know the system, how this is working.
Yeah.
All I remember though is like the spitz is like this massive oven. It's their hottest one, and I would guess it was 240 degrees.
That's
because
what I was gonna say.
You couldn't go more than 60 seconds without pouring water over your head. Like they have this water pump that's constantly running and people are just pouring water because it's so hot.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you have to wear a hat in there, like one of the sauna hats?
They didn't have hats.
Dang.
A couple people did, but it's quite the experience.
Yeah, and it's cool seeing just the Russian culture because there's a
Yeah.
lot of people that are in like their 50s and 60s that go there.
Yeah.
Like you'll see like an old grandma that's in there and she's on the top level of the schwitz, like not like whistling Dixie, like nothing's
Yeah,
going
just
on, and
taking
then
it
we're
straight
just
to the
melting
face.
after 2 minutes.
Yo, dude, my back was just fried.
So it's
That's-
multiple
that's-
stories too?
Well, it's like
Yeah.
and that's actually where Jesse Itzler took Sarah Blakely on their first date. Fun
That's an
fact.
incredible first date.
That's legendary.
She had no idea. And then they had sushi reservations afterwards. So she was like, so I have to go in this, get my hair all jacked up. But she's a trooper.
It's kind of genius though because it's like the sauna, you have the best conversation
Dude.
ever. The endorphins are pumping, and then you go get dinner afterwards.
Sauna's life-changing. I think I made like 90% of my friends in the sauna. Yeah, literally it makes you, physiologically form better connections and, endorphins and dopamine and all the good things.
Yeah.
It's like the reason why people like to have drinks to be social. It kind of
Yeah.
produces the same response.
Definitely. Yeah, there's this whole sauna culture scene that's blowing up right now. And I know from having sauna here at Squatch where we're recording, some of the best combos I've ever had are just like chilling in the sauna for like an hour and just like having people revolve door in.
Yeah.
And you just get way deeper, way faster. Like there's I feel like small talk doesn't really exist.
No.
Like you start to like press into people's like core values, who they are.
Definitely.
Like immediately.
Well, like people will talk like when you struggle, you produce oxytocin, which cultivates relationships. It's like when you're stressed. The idea is that when you're stressed, it's a hormone that makes your body reach out for help in a way.
Yeah.
So like when you control that adversity, man, like your body's primed to get to know people. And also like you're face to face. There's no phones, like
Right.
no distractions. It's actually like it's almost like a bubble in a crazy world.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm that guy and I bring my phone in the sauna and I know it's a cardinal sin. I got to stop.
Well,
that.
I mean, people do it, but usually it's gonna like overheat. Especially the iPhone 15, man. It's been a horrible launch for them.
For real?
Yeah, like you plug it in and it like overheats, and
dang.
it's been crazy. So
Wow.
I can't imagine the sauna.
Do you go at your house in Nashville? Do you have a sauna in the backyard? And if so, what brands do you?
Yeah, I work with Sisu.
Okay, Pete's the man.
Dude, I mean, he's one of my best friends. Like, there's a lot of saunas out there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that theirs is the best for a couple of reasons. I think that theirs is the best because they're simple. They're like, we're going to make an awesome product, really great materials, the best heater, but also like what they stand for. Like they're made in the U.S. Pete's a great guy. They're always going to give back and do it the right way. And I think, you know, that matters. I think the people behind the company matter. So I would pay more for a Sisu just based on that, knowing the people behind it and what they do and how they do it, regardless of any of the, you know, intricacies of the actual sauna. And the other thing is too, is like U.S. made for a sauna, I think is really important because anytime you're at really high heats and you're talking about glues and adhesives, there's a lot of toxicity when you increase the temperatures like that. So, you know, there's minimal glues in a Sisu, and most of it's like nailed together, and it's all cedar and U.S. made. So, you know, you're not going to get any weird toxins.
Wow. You don't really hear a lot of people talking about that. Like most people talk about the benefits of like detoxing in a sauna.
Yeah.
So you're saying you can actually get exposure to toxicity.
Definitely. I mean, like, you know, if they're imported in and there's not a lot of regulations around what type of adhesives they use or testing, you know, especially in some of the infrared saunas, you know, a lot of them are, there's a lot of glue, there's a lot of technology and screens and stuff like that. When you heat that up to high temperatures, it can be pretty harmful. So, you know, I don't think there's ever been any direct studies done, but knowing what happens at high temperatures to almost any adhesive, I think it's really important to do your research. And that's not going to show up for a long time. That's going to be some gnarly long-term outcomes if there is something going wrong there.
Yeah. Do you know how much you can get? The Sisu, their basic unit is like 2 to 4 people, I think. Is it like $5,000 or something like that?
I think it's like 65 around there.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things too. The other reason I love them is like, if you have an issue, like they're going to take care of it. It's hard to put a value on that. That's kind of like with the cold plunges. I work with Edge Theory, and there's a million cold plunge brands right now, but there's a value in just knowing that the company's going to do the right thing. And if something goes wrong, like stuff like that breaks, like it's high use, you know, extreme temperatures. Like, so picking a brand that's actually going to stand behind it, that's important.
Yeah. What do you say to someone that's like, Todd, I really want to get a sauna. I'm struggling with paying that much money for something. Do you normally say like it's really like a holistic asset and that's how you view it, or what would your response be to someone that struggles with the price point on that?
I mean, it's a valid concern. I think that, well, one, I know Sisu went through a lot to work with a firm to have financing options because it is a huge chunk of money.
Yeah.
But when you break it down and you look at the research and the benefits and the long-term health outcomes, like the price is pretty easy to justify. So if it's doable for them, obviously saving is a great option. It's something to invest your money in, but there's a ton of gyms like, you know, that are $10, $20 a month to have a sauna. So it doesn't have to be this like, you know, luxury experience. Obviously when you have it at your place, you do it so much more. And I think there is a value in that, but it doesn't have to be like special. Just, you know, get hot and, you know, there's some grungy places that are pretty cheap, but it's worth it for the outcomes.
Have you always been this, like aware of just taking care of yourself from like the sauna side of things, cold plunge, things like that?
Well, it's funny. Like I've always weirdly loved the sauna. Like even when I was a kid, my dad was a wrestling coach, and guys would be cutting weight like at a hotel, which is illegal. So sorry, MHSA is watching. But and I always just like loved the feeling of going in there. Like when I was like 10 years old in a hotel, I would like sneak in the sauna. But I mean, I think I really became obsessed with it. Like I was an overweight kid. Like I was definitely not in good shape. And in 8th grade, or actually in 6th grade, I started lifting like pretty intensely until I had a bad box jump incident with my shin, and I took a few months off. I think everyone's been there. Remember they said the metal boxes?
Dude.
I was traumatized. I couldn't jump on a box for like a year.
Especially if you're vertically challenged when it comes to jumping.
I already can't jump.
Yeah,
so like
stay on the ground.
It's like jumping onto a knife. That's what the corner felt like. But so like I started lifting, and then, you know, I was always like very insecure as a kid. Like I would dread the summer because of pool parties. You know, I would hope I had an excuse to not go because, you know, I was just so uncomfortable with my shirt off. And then I started lifting hard and feeling better and kind of like seeing some changes and reading Muscle and Fitness, which I know a lot of guys like that's the evolution, whether people will admit it or not, the aesthetically driven goals. And yeah, just like I've always kind of loved researching and learning. And when I started to feel better and have more confidence, I kind of became obsessed with it. Yeah. And then a whole nother level of obsession started when I got to Michigan State, because I was like, I have a lot of work to do. Yeah. And so I felt like I had to wring every ounce of ability out in order to compete with some of the guys. Not even compete, just stay on the team, not get cut at that point.
Yeah, and for the listener that might not know your full backstory, I mean, it's fascinating because weren't you in between going to a D3 school and slotting a walk-on spot at Michigan State, and your thought process was, will I regret this decision or not?
Yeah, that was it. I mean, I originally thought I was going to play baseball in college, and I had talked to Eastern Michigan about potentially walking on football and baseball, and baseball was my best sport. Like, my dad actually just texted me the other day. He was like, you have the 9th highest career batting average in the state of Michigan history. He was like on the website.
I love that your dad knows that too.
Oh yeah, and I'm like, I had no idea, but it was my best sport. I was from a tiny school, like we literally had drive your tractor to school day on one of the last days of school. Like, I'm from a small school.
Did you do that?
I didn't have.
No tractor.
I didn't have a tractor. A lot of people did. Yeah. I had a cowboy hat and I drove a F-250 and had a John Deere shirt, but So I didn't know how to get like recruited. I didn't know about all these like showcases and stuff like that. So I think baseball probably would have been the route had I understood the recruiting process. And Eastern was like pretty interested. It was just in the spring of my senior year, so it was too late. All their scholarships were taken up. But there's something about football, like the intensity and the aggression and the team aspect of football. I think it's unlike anything else out there, and it's hard to describe, I think, for people who haven't played, but it's rare that you have to depend so heavily on other people. And there's such like when you bring in like physical pain as an element and protecting people and relying on somebody else to not get injured and hurt, based on their responsibilities in a play, I think that really brings people together, and it's very unique.
It's like war.
You feel like you're going into battle. Obviously, it's nothing like that, but in a sense, like from a mentality perspective, you have to get to that place, and I think that's rare. So, I mean, basically what happened is I showed up at 7-on-7 in the summer. We were just messing around. We were playing the biggest school in Jackson, which had a ton of like really big recruits. That's where I'm from, Jackson, Michigan. And I was messing around. I jumped in at tight end. I didn't even play tight end, but I jumped in. I made a couple of catches because I got in really, really good shape. I was lifting, working out, and dropped some weight. At this point, I was in really good shape. And their coach happened to see me make a couple of one-handed catches, like messing around. Yeah. And Michigan State showed up in the spring, and they're like, we have some walk-on spots available. Like, who do you have? And he happened to see that. And he was like, if you should talk to anybody, go talk to Todd Anderson at Napoleon High School. And at this point, like, I'm thinking of going to a D3 school, and coaches used to call people down to the office. They'd be like, Todd, come to the office, and a D3 coach would pop in or whatever. And so I got called down to the office. I'm thinking it's some tiny school, and I look at their shirt, and it's a Michigan State helmet. And I was like, I literally was like, oh, this guy must be like an academic guy. Like, still had no idea. And he went down this, conversation of, we have a spot available. Like, I couldn't even like wrap my head around it. Like, it wasn't, and I've said this, like, it wasn't. So my whole life, I went to Michigan State games. My dad was a huge Michigan State fan. My dad went to Michigan State, and he actually worked in the recruiting office, like sending out recruits mail and stuff like that. Wow. Like, loved it and been around the program. And it wasn't even like a dream to play there, because it was literally not even in the universe of possibilities. Like, it was like me being like, I want to be the CEO of Tesla. Yeah. Like, that's what it felt like. Like, that's not going to happen. Yeah. Right. And so when he walked in there, I didn't even know what to think. Like, the rest of the day, my mind was just spinning. And at first it was exciting, but then it was like, what am I getting myself into? So I made a pros and cons list with my parents, which we still have to this day.
Nice.
And there was a lot of pros to go into Adrian College, which was the college I was going to potentially go to. But at the end of the list at Michigan State, it was like, am I going to regret this? And I knew if I didn't try, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. So kind of took a chance, and here we are. And I honestly think if I would have went to Adrian, I think I would have been a pretty good player, but I would have never been as close to as good as I was at Michigan State, because you're a product of your surroundings, and you just adapt to who you're around.
Yeah.
Did that feel like a pretty big decision at the time?
Oh, dude. I mean, it's still probably the most important decision I've made in my life.
Right.
Looking back, just from a trajectory standpoint.
Right. Have you had to make a similar decision in your professional career after sports, where it felt like you really were kind of like weighing pros and cons and just seeing trajectory? Because I do feel like that moment in time around college is so unique for people.
Yeah.
It can like really change the course of the rest of your life.
I mean, there's been decisions I think that have really changed the trajectory, but I don't think there's been one where it comes to a head where it's like, here's the two routes. It's actually pretty rare in life. Usually things kind of just flow into each other.
Right.
But it was like, here's the two routes. You can go this direction or this direction.
Yeah.
And I don't think there has been. And I also don't think that anything's affected the trajectory to that extent. But because up until that point, or after that, I just kind of kept moving and doing the next thing and keeping my head down. But I mean, honestly, starting Dream Recovery, that's been a massive decision. And that wasn't one that was easy, but it's been incredible.
Yeah. We're pumped to dive into all the Dream stuff. You made me think, I remember I was telling you off air that I first played baseball at Seton Hall, so really good Division I program in New Jersey.
Yep.
They get a bunch of guys drafted. And I remember showing up my freshman year and being so intimidated because these juniors and seniors are like fully grown men, and I'm like this scrawny 18-year-old.
There's such a difference between an 18-year-old guy and a 22-year-old guy, too.
Yeah.
Like that, it's not even the same ballpark.
Yeah.
No pun intended. But.
Yeah. But I'm trying to imagine for you, like essentially unrecruited, don't have a guaranteed spot. You're at one of the best football programs in the country. Can you explain what that feeling was like walking on your freshman year? And like, when did you start to really see like, all right, I can compete with these guys and I can earn a spot?
Yeah, I mean, I literally wanted to just like melt into the wall the first day I walked in. I was like, I felt so out of place. The other thing is too, like I'm from a very country town, like we had one black kid at my school. He was like one of my best friends. But from a culture perspective, like that was a real thing too. It's like I walked in, people from all different backgrounds. Like I just never have experienced like that mesh of people, and I just felt out of place and overwhelmed. And which looking back was like the best thing ever. But the first week was, I mean, I wanted to quit after the fourth day. Like it was horrible. I walked in and guys are massive. These offensive linemen, I'm like, what is happening right now? Like I wasn't even that big and that strong, and they looked like they were 45 years old. And I mean, my confidence that first semester like couldn't have been lower.
Yeah.
And stack on top of it, classes, I was a math major. I'm taking Calc 3, chemistry, just getting smacked right in the face with every piece of adversity you could imagine. Waking up at 5 o'clock for lifts. Like I was so tired and exhausted. I think I had a 1.9 GPA after the first semester, put on academic probation. Like it was the worst experience. But, I think when you hang in there, and there's something to be said about just showing up.
Yeah.
You're never going to have maximum motivation and walk in and, ready to attack the world every single day. But sometimes you just got to show up. Like my coaches always say, you can either be the storm or weather the storm. In that first semester, I was weathering the storm. But, eventually it subsides and you're able to kind of dig your heels in. But you said when I think I could compete, I mean, the first semester, I thought no way. But I did, I went back to my roots and I would go lift with my buddy Adam. We would go and do extra lifts and go to the IM, the student center. And I got confidence from the fact that I was doing more than everybody else. So by the time spring rolled around, I changed positions to defensive end, and I was getting a lot stronger and kind of like, learning the system, and I felt more confident. And I think in that spring, I was like, I think I can do this.
Yeah.
And from that spring to the next season, it was leaps and bounds better.
Yeah.
So
you faced a fair amount of adversity while you were at Michigan State, even beyond that first semester, some injuries and stuff. Did that force you to level up in ways that you probably otherwise wouldn't have really seen yourself grow?
I think it did, but at the time, I think at that age especially, you kind of just, it's almost like a day-by-day approach. So I don't know if I had like a great strategy, or I don't know if I had any epiphanies. Like I said, I just kept showing up.
Yeah.
But there was a point where, when I went to Michigan State, everyone from my hometown thought I was insane.
Yeah.
They were like, we'd never had anyone go Division I in basically any sport. And they were like, what are you doing, basically? And I had this chip on my shoulder of like, I'm going to prove these people wrong. And so, redshirt my first year. Second year, like I said, I got a lot of confidence. And, before the season, it was like, we're going to give you a chance to earn a starting spot or a scholarship. That's like how far I had come at defensive end. And right before camp, we were doing summer conditioning. I pulled my quad. So normal pull, like a, 2 or 3 week, like a hamstring tweak or whatever. And no big deal. And this is right before camp, maybe 2 weeks before camp. Well, 3 days before camp, I get out of the shower, slip, fall into a hurdle stretch, in like my heel is tucked to my butt, and I just like tear my quad, which you can see.
Jeez.
I'll show you guys.
That's crazy.
Like you can see even like here, like my quad is like there's nothing in there yet. So
insane.
it's
So it
gnarly.
just straight snapped.
Yeah, and it balled up, and so I woke up the next day, and it felt horrible. But this was my shot. I had a chance to get a scholarship, and so I didn't tell anybody about it. And I show up to camp 2 days later. I run our conditioning test, which is 20 half gassers, which is basically like across and back on the field, like 106 yards, and it's a horrible test. It's really difficult, almost a sprint, but not a little less. And I ran all 20. I bent so I tore my rectus femoris, which is the only quad muscle that crosses your knee and your hip. Mm-hmm. So if I kind of bent over a little bit, it would take that tension off of my hip, and I was able to kind of look normal. Ran all 20, and I woke up the second day of camp, and my leg was, I'm not kidding you, black and blue from my hip to my foot. It was insane.
Wow.
And the trainers were like, oh my gosh, like, and we really didn't know what was going on because it was so swollen you couldn't see the muscle. But that was pretty much it for that season. So next season comes around, and I'm running with the twos. I'm second string at defensive end, still running with the twos. I'm like, mixed in with the ones on our third down package, like a pass rush guy. And we're like a week out from the season, and I like take a step, and I just feel something like sharp in my knee. Turns out I tore some cartilage on the head of my femur and tore my meniscus all up, and had a knee surgery. Opposite leg. And, season was pretty much over. I remember I had knee surgery 2 days before our first game. And so the day before the game, one thing, it just shows you how great of a guy Coach D'Antonio was. Like, he saw me the day after surgery, like crutching back to the dorm, and literally stopped the car in the middle of the road, got out to check and see how I was and talk to me.
Wow.
Like, he's just salt of the earth. But, so the next day I go to the game, and they're like, we can't have you stay at the game because if you get hit on the sideline like this early out of surgery, it's going to mess your knee up. So I just remember it was like a movie scene. I went for a pregame warm up, and I had to leave the stadium. I remember crutching away from the stadium, and I don't know if you've ever been outside of a stadium during a game, but it's like a ghost town.
Yeah.
So I'm crutching away from the stadium. I can hear like the crowd from the game in the background, and it was like, it was low. It's just so sad. And so now I'm 3 years in, and I haven't played it down. So having that chip on my shoulder, everyone from my hometown just thinks I'm not good enough to play. And I'm like, no, I'm telling you, I'm good enough to play. And so, that whole season, like, my knee, like, it's supposed to be recovered, and it just felt horrible. I couldn't extend my leg. I couldn't run. It was not good. And I remember leading up to that spring, Kirk Cousins was our quarterback, and I was like, dude, I think I might be done. Like, I don't know if, I don't think my knee's ever going to be better. Like, I can barely run. And, he's like, I'll pray for you. And again, probably the best leader I've ever been around. But that spring, I'm like, okay, I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to try. I can't really run. First practice, I'm like, rushing out the edge, and I hit this guy, Henry Conway, like as hard as I could in my shoulder. And it was kind of like my leg was extended at the same time, and my knee just went like, boom, like cracked. And I was like, oh, here we go again. Like, this is it. And it kind of felt okay. And I woke up the next day anticipating like it's going to be horrible pain. And we went to warm up and all the pain was gone.
Wow.
Like completely fine.
Didn't knock it back into place.
And so the doctors think there was like some cartilage or, well, now I know exactly what happened is I had knee surgery like in April, and there was a 2 centimeter chunk of bone they had to take out that was just settled in the back of the knee. So that had to be settled in a place that was causing a major issue, got hit, and just popped it out, and it settled in a place that didn't cause a problem.
That's amazing.
And I didn't know that till like this year, but yeah, so that happened, which if it didn't, I would have never played again, but it happened and ended up, starting and having a great couple of years. So.
Wow. So you went from that day basically being like, I haven't played an actual game in 3 years. I don't even know if my career is going to be anything, to like, that's all the proof of concept you needed, and then you just took it and ran with it.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah.
That pretty much changed everything.
Were you a captain your senior year?
It's like an elected captain for a few games, but Kirk was our main captain. We had a couple other guys, but Kirk was actually a captain his sophomore year, first ever at Michigan State.
Wow.
And he wasn't even the starting quarterback when he got elected,
Yeah.
which shows you what type of guy he is.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
What was so different about him?
It's hard to describe, but I always talk about this. I think leadership, people don't realize, I think especially like I talk to a lot of CEOs and executives in the corporate world. I think people don't realize that leadership is a 24-hour-a-day job. It's not like it stops when the workday ends. And I think he was such a high character guy and cared about people so much that you could not respect him. He worked his butt off. A lot of people work hard, but he worked his butt off at football and at being a teammate and in school and his faith. So, there was nothing you could poke holes in. Like, he was just a stand-up guy and would do anything for anybody. And he'd also remember everything about everybody. He'd be like, walking through, how's your sister's grad school going? How's your mom? I know she was sick. Like, he would remember everything. And,
Wow.
and there was no reason for it, or there wasn't like an angle. He genuinely cared about people. And he's still that way to this day. And I actually think for the first time after like quarterback, people are starting to realize like what an incredible human being is. People are talking about like the money he made and stuff. I'm like, if anyone in this world, give the money to him, because he's going to do the right stuff with it. He's going to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
So give him the biggest contract he can find, because it's going to be a positive outcome.
Wow. So it's like his empathy and his willingness to care about people is why he was such a good leader.
Definitely. And he's, obviously he's very strong in his faith, but just the integrity he has, he does things the right way, and you know exactly who he is and what you're going to get.
Yeah.
I remember that year that he got drafted. He got drafted second round after RG3 had already gotten drafted by the Skins.
Yep.
So I feel like I remember thinking like, that's such a weird move, but it makes sense, like draft the highest value player on the board. But if it's also somebody who is a captain his sophomore year and not even starting at quarterback, he's just going to make the locker room that much better.
Yeah.
Like I feel like we've all probably played with guys who are just like intangible to the team or invaluable to the team just because they make the vibe of the whole team better, even if they're not on the field.
Yeah, definitely. And it's hard to be a leader when you're not like one of the best players. I think that really shows true leadership, because you know how it is. If a guy's really good, like you're gonna have immediate respect. So it was pretty cool to watch. I didn't realize it like at the time. You just kind of, that's how it is, But looking back, it was pretty cool to witness.
Yeah. I'm really glad that Harry dug into that question about your injuries, because I actually didn't know that about you, and to get the full backstory. And it's like there's so many different moments along your story that could have vastly altered the entire trajectory of your career, whether you went to that D3 school, whether you gave into the injuries. Like it's amazing. And the walk-on thing is so interesting, because there was a kid that I played with at Seton Hall that was going to go to Rowan, which is a D3 school, got a last-minute walk-on spot, and just came into the program, dominated, got drafted by the Red Sox in like the 10th round, and now he's in AAA and probably going to make the big league roster this year. You just can't predict who's going to make it. It's like everyone's a specimen, and there's certain guys that just perform and certain people don't perform.
Yeah, I think it's hard to tell people's potential, right? Like when people come from different schools and backgrounds and they're around different competition, it's hard to tell how they're going to do when they're exposed to like a better competition. Yeah. They might perform at the same level they did at some like small school, and when they adjust, but it's just hard to tell. Like I think it's it's still hard. There's probably so many guys that slip through
Yeah.
the cracks just because you don't know when they get it. It's like in life, if you get around the right people, you get in a certain situation and you adapt. It's hard to predict how you're going to adapt.
Totally.
So it's the recruiting process is wild.
It's wild.
What was the motivation for you just sticking with it? Like, I imagine you probably had dark days there where you're like,
Yeah.
man, maybe
Honestly,
I should just call it.
A couple things. I mean, I always dreamed of running out of the tunnel, and I always dreamed of having my name announced. So at Michigan State, they announced the starting lineup in your hometown. So that was one, just that moment. And then two was honestly like people from my hometown, like not thinking I could do it.
Yeah.
So many people thought I was insane, and I would have them in the back of my mind. And I don't think it was necessarily a good thing. It's coming from a place of negativity in some aspects, but like just wanted to prove people wrong and show it could be done. But the thing about my name, like, so my senior year when I was a starter fullback, I live in Jackson, Michigan. That's like my address, but the small town I'm from is Napoleon, Michigan. So I before our first game, I went to our media person. I'm like, can you change my hometown to Napoleon, Michigan? Because I had this vision of hearing my name, and we went to warm up, and they started, they started doing the starting lineups, and this is this moment I basically have lived for. And so like we went back to locker rooms, and like I was getting yelled at. Everyone's in the locker room. We're going to do these meetings, and I like stayed in the tunnel just to hear it, Todd Anderson, Napoleon, Michigan. So it was worth it for sure.
Yeah, something you had dreamed of in your mind, probably replayed hundreds, if not thousands of times.
But questioned if it would ever happen.
Yeah.
A lot of times.
Yeah,
And
then you earned that and achieved every second of that too, which is so cool. So you go on, you have this amazing career at Michigan State. You get picked up by the Rams. What was your experience like in the NFL versus Division I football?
Well, I mean, it's hard because college, there's such a bond, going from an 18-year-old to a 22-year-old. There's such purpose, and you feel so attached to the school and the student body. It's a little different now, but the NFL, at the end of the day, it's a business, and there's some great guys, and everybody is. The effort level couldn't be higher because you're almost like you're making yourself a living. It's your livelihood. So it's not that people aren't trying, but there's not as much motivation to kind of come together. So I thought that was kind of weird, especially in the beginning of the season, like people are trying to earn jobs. But mine came to an abrupt end. Like, I don't know if you know the story, but I failed a drug test. That's how my career ended. And it was a wild.
I didn't know that.
That's a wild story. So basically, we had a month off, and we were going to my buddy's boat on Lake Michigan. It's like a 2.5 hour drive. And we were up late the night before, so I woke up and I was like, I'm super tired. And I had like some fat burner samples, like from GNC or whatever. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm so tired. I need some energy. So I took them. I knew there might be a banned substance in it, but I was off for a month, and it was like a stimulant, and it was like I didn't think anything of it. Halfway up the drive, get a call from the NFL. You have a drug test. We're going to meet you wherever you're at. Random drug test. And my stomach dropped. Like, I was like, I started looking at the ingredients. There's some stimulant in there that's banned, sure enough. Pull over, like, I'm like, do I try to throw up? Like, start drinking water. And it turns out, this is the craziest part. This is how you know it's meant to be. The NFL had my wrong phone number. Like, my number ends in 04. They called the same number ending in 05, which would be pretty much a random person.
Yeah.
That person happened to know my parents. They gave the NFL my parents' number, and then my parents connected him with me. And so if that wouldn't have happened, I wouldn't have even been contacted, and nothing would happen. And that stimulant stays in your system for like a day.
Yeah.
Now it wouldn't even have been a suspension. It would have been like a warning. You get like 3 of them. But back then, it was treated. Every single substance was treated as a performance enhancer, and it had a 4-game suspension. It's totally different now because it didn't make sense. It was like the same as like steroids, basically. They were the same punishment.
That's crazy.
So ended up like, they came to his house. We did drug tests, and it takes a long time, but when I ended up going to get called back and signed for like practice squad and all that, that's when the team found out that I failed it, and that was it.
Right.
They never re-signed my contract. And, but I think it gave me clarity. I just met Katie, and I could kind of see the path ahead of like being a free agent and being bounced around team to team and potentially moving all over. And like, that just didn't seem like something I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I was pretty beat up, I had the knee surgeries, the quad,
Yeah.
I was pretty banged up. I had a pulled hamstring at that time. So, I accomplished more than I ever would have thought. And it just felt like it was just kind of time to move on.
Yeah.
And you had studied math in college. Where was your head at in terms of like what you were going to do next?
Well, so I
Was it
originally
like,
studied math, but then I switched to like kinesiology, and I knew I wanted to go in the strength conditioning world. So like when I was getting ready for pro day, which is like the combine basically, I almost did like an internship. I was with this guy, Derek Touche. He was like a mentor and really great, came from IMG, and he was a strength conditioning coach. I still talk to him to this day. He's awesome. But I would like learn from him as I was training, like ask him questions and, like pick his brain. And I ended up going back there after I stopped playing to do an internship and work there and kind of get my start in the strength conditioning world. He trained a lot of NFL guys, a lot of pro athletes, and he really gave me my first chance. And so I wanted to go in the strength conditioning world. That's what I wanted to do. But then I thought I wanted to be a college strength conditioning coach, but then just seeing the hours and also the opportunities and, you could be the best strength conditioning coach in the world, but your head coach, gets fired and then you don't have a job.
Yeah.
And so the uncertainty was just kind of hard to deal with.
Yeah. So you learn under Greg Touche. Do you
Derek.
then,
Derek. Yeah.
Derek, do you then go right into Equinox?
Yeah. So then Katie decided to go to University of Miami, and we moved in together. And so, yeah, I started at Equinox and started as a trainer, then management, and then I ended up overseeing places in Miami and Chicago, and then a lot of New York City, and working on the corporate side. And it was an incredible experience. I got to learn. Equinox is it's just a luxury facility, but they have so many resources. So some of the people I got to spend time with and learn from, like the best of the best in the world, every single area of health, wellness, and performance. So super grateful for that experience.
Yeah. When I was in the city, I would go to the Equinox on Wall Street.
Oh, yeah.
But it was a converted bank. So
Yeah,
it was kind of
really
small.
It's pretty cool, though.
It was really cool.
Yeah.
But it was kind of packed in. So like if you were going to try and do a superset, if you were going during prime hours, like if I would go at 7 a.m. or like 6 p.m., you're getting the bench sniped immediately.
It's different now, though.
Can't
Like
be.
after
Is it?
COVID,
Yeah.
it's not quite as like outrageous. Yeah,
Yeah.
it used to be wild. Some of those gyms, like, you'd have like a foot.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
Such good networking in those gyms too. I made some amazing contacts there. And I remember I was saying to you when we had our first phone call, we were just talking about the collective and the community that's there and how unique it is. And you said, you're like, dude, 10 years ago, Equinox was kind of like that in New York City, right? It was like
Definitely.
a different culture.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a vibe. It was busy, and I think the training world, personal training world has shifted a lot, but yeah, the best trainers and just like everyone had a trainer, and there was no space in there, and it was pretty cool, the high performing environment. I think that a lot's changed. I think that fitness world, obviously, there's a lot more virtual stuff and apps, and I think the mindset of younger people is different, and I also think the accessibility is a lot different with social platforms and stuff like that. But I don't think like there's not many new trainers that are just trying to train in person the rest of their life. So I think that's a challenge for a facility like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did your mindset shift being player, now kind of coach, and starting to train people outside of the actual sporting world? What were some of the things that you gravitated towards? Like, I know you're big into sleep now, but were there any other aspects of health that you were really trying to anchor into early on?
I mean, I was pretty early on the cold, hot stuff. I always loved that. But like sleep very quickly became like a passion, just because, if you're a trainer or you're in the strength conditioning world, you're trying to help people, and you're trying to help people perform. And when you really think about trying to help people, it's hard to argue there's anything more impactful than sleep.
Yeah.
So, and it's also something that's usually an afterthought. So when I started learning more and more about it, I got to spend time with Dr. Jennifer Martin from UCLA. She's an amazing sleep psychologist. I realized like this is almost like the silver bullet of health and wellness and performance. And we need to attack this more head on, just like we have in the strength conditioning world. You know, there's so much talk about like, you know, sets and reps, intensities and different periodization models and all this stuff, but nobody is attacking sleep. And this was like 2015. And so I kind of dove head first into all that stuff and realized what an impact it would make. When I started speaking on it, like, it was so cool to hear how much it impacted people's lives. You know, it was literally life-changing, life-altering. So I'm like, if I can affect people in that way, like, I'm going to go all in on this.
Yeah, I remember hearing the Stan Efferding's quote a couple years ago, and he said something like, if you're getting 5 hours of sleep to do your morning cardio session, you're stepping over $20 bills to pick up dimes.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really interesting.
That's great.
And one of the best videos on your Instagram, it might be like this, it's one of the pin videos, is you basically make this argument of like, people think, hey, if you're prioritizing getting 8 hours of sleep, you're selfish. And you're like, I'd actually argue that if you're not getting 8 hours of sleep, that's selfish. And I'd love for you to just expand on that thought because it was so powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, when you look at it, if you're trying to show up for people as a spouse, you know, a boss, a coworker, or a friend, looking at how sleep affects your mood stability, your motivation, your mindset, your ability to read others' emotions, when you're chronically being underslept and you're knowingly doing that, like you have the ability to sleep longer, you are saying that you're okay with being 80% of the friend or spouse or coworker or boss that you can be, because from a mental aspect, you're not going to have the same empathy. You're not going to relate the same way. You're not going to perform at the same level. And you're almost like letting the people around you down in a sense, just from a pure statistical perspective. So, you know, I think then when you think about being selfless, I think you think about pouring yourself into other people, you know, and pouring yourself into them for their success, but you're only pouring 80% of yourself in if you're underslept all the time. So in a way, it's like, that's the best thing you can do for everybody else around you.
So I feel like sleep is one of those things. It's like, we always talk about the basics where it's like, get sleep, get sunlight, go for a walk, eat real foods. And like, those are like the least sexy things when it comes to being healthy, but they're the pillars of health.
Definitely.
And I'm just curious how you get people excited about just like focusing on their sleep, because it moves the needle in a way that basically no other aspect of health can, but really creating boundaries and setting up like a good sleep schedule is so hard to get people excited about, because there's so many excuses to just be like, nah, like I'm going to stay up late or, you know, whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Well, a lot of trial and error, I'll say that, but I usually take about an hour to get people excited. But I think I really changed my conversation or my speech with people based on the crowd. And I really try to relate it to whatever they're excited about.
Yeah.
You know, if it's a corporate crowd, like there's studies showing with CEOs, there's a direct relationship, a direct correlation between the hours of sleep the CEO is getting and the safety and trust that the employees feel, which is insane. I think basically if your CEO sleeps more, you're going to have more trust and safety in your workspace, which is, if you look at 5 dysfunction of a team, trust is the foundation of any team. And so if I'm speaking to that crowd, I think you just have to relate the things that apply to their life and how much sleep affects those things. And with athletes, we'll almost stick to the pure performance side, like reaction times and power output and bench press and all these things. But it's hard because it's not sexy, like you said. It's not exciting. It's not like the most fun thing to talk about. But I think when people realize, when you talk about study after study and all the positive outcomes, and you show them how much better they can feel and like what's going to happen when they commit to this, usually by the end they are pretty fired up, because sleep is one of the rare things that's insanely good for us, that's easy and enjoyable to do.
Yeah.
Like most stuff sucks that's good for you. Like eating healthy sucks. Like it's not easy.
Yeah.
Exercise is hard. That can suck at times. Consistency is hard. Most people enjoy sleeping. So when you lay all this stuff out there and you explain to them, it's not selfish to do it, and you are going to feel better, and it is good for you. It's not lazy. Like the whole rise and grind mentality, like that's gone. Like that should be forgotten forever.
Yeah.
And I think you almost have to allow people to realize like this is okay. Like you should do this. And if you want to be a high performer, this is what you need to do. And as soon as they have that mindset shift and they forget that culture of the whole, like, you know, sleep when you're dead thing, their life changes and they restructure the entire way they think about their day.
Yeah. I think Harry and I are two good guys to talk to about this. And I think this is going to be relatable to the audience because I think right now we have, I don't want to say different perspectives, but more like just different lifestyles. So we're partners on 3 different businesses right now. And it's like almost every dollar we've been making, we've just been reinvesting back into the business. Like we're definitely in that grind mode, for lack of a better term. I feel like what Harry has been doing is he's really deep diving on his sleep and recovery. And it's like phone is outside the room, you get your 8 hours. Cause I think he knows, hey, if I prioritize this, it's going to make me show up better for those 3 businesses. I feel like for some reason I have this weird, I don't know if it's a constraint or something mentally where like up until I go to bed, I'm like, oh, but I could send like one more email or like do this text and I'll just like, you know, over consume caffeine, or like there's definitely nights where I'll get like 4 or 5 hours of sleep.
Yep.
And I don't know if it's a mental block that I'm struggling with. I don't know if you think, hey, there are times where you need to just grind and it's okay to not prioritize that stuff, or if it's like, no, dude, you need to get your 8 hours because it's going to make you way better.
I think it's hard. It's a blessing and a curse, or a double-edged sword, I'll say. I think that like the way to think about it, and I've said this, you know, the Abraham Lincoln quote of, if you gave me 6 hours to chop down a tree, I would spend 4 hours sharpening the axe.
Yes.
Like sleep is that axe. All right. So when you think about what needs to be done to be successful in these businesses, I think you have to look at it from an efficiency perspective and a quality of decision perspective, not necessarily a quantity, right? I don't think it's about, like, in most businesses, it's not about how many decisions or how many things you can get done. It's usually what those decisions are and the amount of clarity and perspective and the vision you have and how it's going to affect the outcome of your business. So I think that's the way to look at it, is how can I put myself in the best mindset to make the highest quality decisions and not be in a state that I don't have the mental capacity to clearly think things through. And that's exactly what happens when you're underslept. It's not necessarily about feeling tired or having the energy. It's literally, you know, your perspective can change and you don't have the ability to see clearly. You know, you get clouded by these other thoughts and stressors and all that stuff. But I think the hard part is, you know, for the high performer that's doing a ton of stuff, it's like there's also a benefit in using that stress as motivation and cranking things out. There's a time and place for that. So that balance is tough. I think that more and more what we're seeing is also like, if there's a ton of stress throughout the day, it's almost impossible to sleep well at night. They're not like binary. It's not like I'm awake and I'm asleep. It's a gradient. So I think usually focusing on controlling those stress levels throughout the day, even if you can only sleep 5 hours, it's going to be more of a quality sleep. Where I would guess right now, if you're that stressed throughout the day, it probably transitioned into some tough sleeping environments, or like you don't feel like you're sleeping that well.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair, for sure. Yeah, it's just that like tendency to be like, oh, could I be doing more? But at the same time, I think it's also just working more efficiently. Like if I'm being fully transparent, if I check my screen hours, like, dude, sometimes it's 4 or 5 hours.
What do you feel like you could be doing more of?
I think it's probably just being more diligent with my time during the day and just recognizing the fact that like on this massive list that I have, you're just not going to get everything done every single day. And just saying like, dude, just if I can't have a consistent bedtime and wake up time, how am I going to be successful in my actual job if I can't do the basic thing that's going to set my health up for success?
So what are you worried about doing more of? You said you feel like you could be doing more.
Yeah. I think it's just like the nature of the 3 businesses. It's just a lot of moving parts, right? There's like the supplement side of things. So trying to do sales for that. The podcasting side, get more sponsors, get more good guests. Now with the agency that we have, managing employees and things like that. It's just a lot of moving parts. But my guess is that.
Well, what's the limiting factor? Like what like do you, on, let's say this or with the podcast side, what's the limiting factor of getting more guests or quality guests?
It's really just a time thing right now of just like having deep focused time where I'm like, look, I'm just going to block for an hour. I'm going to focus on podcasts. I'm not going to, because a lot of times I'll be doing one task and I'll be thinking about like 2 to 3 other things. So I think my workflow throughout the day is probably just more disjointed. And like I was saying to you too, right? If I cut back on just 2 hours of my phone time, screen time, whatever you want to call it, that would make me be more productive for 2 hours during the day. So then I could get my ass in bed and get that 8 hours or whatever the time frame is that's appropriate.
So it's really like the focus of your tasks.
Focus
you
of
feel like
the
you have
tasks.
enough time, but it's not aggregated in the right way.
Yeah. And I think there's also just this inherent newfound pressure, especially when you transition to a corporate job and you do something entrepreneurial. It feels like it's all on you when you're by yourself. And then when you have employees too, I think there's that responsibility of like, if we're not showing up, like it's taking food out of our employees' mouths too.
We actually have like outside of our sauna on the wall, we have a quote that says the pressure is good for you because, and I think that's a great quote, especially for like this situation, because like there's been times where in my life where I haven't had pressure and it's horrible. And it's like, it's a gift to be doing something that you feel pressure, which just means you care a lot. And there are responsibilities, but you care a lot and you're also excited about it. That's a gift.
Definitely.
So I think keeping that perspective, but I think like everything you're talking about, when you think about how your brain aligns and you know, how poor sleep impacts mindset and focus, like you really just need efficiency.
Yeah.
And I think sleep and efficiency go hand in hand, like efficiency in task and cognitive function. So I think that would make a big impact is how can I be the most efficient and be the most almost like laser focused on these tasks, because things get clouded when you're underslept.
Yeah.
You know, like you said, you can't almost every, you know, symptom of like ADD, for example, is exaggerated when people are underslept. So I think that, you know, if you could get in a good routine, you would probably get a lot more done in less amount of time. And they've done studies on that. You know, they've done studies on like 55-hour work weeks versus 40, and the amount of sleep people get. And when people are only working 40 hours a week and they're sleeping well, the total body of work is actually increased, even though there's 15 more hours in the other person's work week. It's just because they're so efficient in those 40 hours. So I think that's something to think about.
That's really good.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say?
I was just gonna add, I feel like there's a certain level of just like always wanting to do like a ton in your days, and it's almost a reframe of just like how can I do not the least amount of stuff, but like how can I do like the most important things
and the best
as I can. Whereas like this summer I was getting terrible sleep, but I was still during the day I was still like working out, doing a bunch of work, and it just got to the point where I was like, I'm just not even prioritizing like the real things at this point, like that are actually important for us to make like sizable increases in all the stuff that we're doing. I just felt kind of like busy and unfocused, just doing a lot of things that like didn't really move the needle. And I was like, I just got to like restack how I'm thinking about my health and just put sleep at the forefront of that. Yeah. And I noticed like as soon as I put the phone out of my room and as soon as I basically set it up so that the night before my phone's outside of my room, so there's no chance of me looking at my phone first thing in the morning. And then I would just get out of bed and get outside. And the first like 2 days I did that, I didn't touch the phone. I would just walk right out the door as soon as I woke up. My brain for the rest of the day was just like on another level. I was like, all right, I don't need any like caffeine or anything like that as long as I just get that good quality sleep and set myself up. So that was a light bulb moment for me.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, it's I think when people make that shift in the first time they realize how much better you're gonna feel, like you'll never go back.
Yeah.
Like it's truly a life-changing moment.
But sleep is a tough one too, because relative change, like when you're in the gym, you can obviously see like the relative change over a long enough period of time. Sleep, you can grow accustomed to feeling like crap
100%.
and like covering up things, like, you know, using coffee, using other stimulants to keep you awake, and you don't even realize how detrimental that lack of sleep actually is.
Yes, it's so easy to be acclimated to being chronically underslept. Like I think most people are just acclimated and they don't even know what optimal feels like. You know, when I talk to people, so many people will tell me like, oh, I'm good at 5.5 hours. 5.5 hours, I'm good. I'm good at 6 hours. And statistically, less than 1% of people can function optimally off of 6 hours of sleep. So when people tell me that, I'm like, you're not good. Like you think you're good. You're just used to it.
Yeah.
You're kind of used to feeling crappy all day. And when they make that change, they don't, like, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
Like, you don't realize like how good you could feel. But it's also very hard because there's a million things pulling at you, like, you know, like you were saying, and there is like as a high performer, like you're always going to be feeling like you're not doing enough. That's never going to go away.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to be able to shut that down and make the decisions like you have and like really, you know, make it a priority. What other stuff have you changed?
What I'm trying to change right now is food before bed. I've noticed that like eating too close to my bedtime is like really messing up my sleep.
Definitely.
So trying to like not eat after like 6:37, like give myself like 2-3 hours.
That makes a huge difference for me too. It's hard when we talk to athletes. It's hard because like so that first like REM cycle is where you have your biggest growth hormone spike of the day. So like, you know, you go to bed, your first REM cycle, like by far the biggest spike of growth hormone. But if you eat right before bed, you miss that spike and your body doesn't make up for it.
Oh, wow.
So it's kind of like if you don't use it, you lose it situation.
Yeah.
So what's hard with athletes is obviously like caloric needs are very important. Sometimes they have later practices, getting enough calories and nutrition, but also like allowing that gap is tough.
Yeah. One thing that's helped me a lot is there's a girl in town that does healthy meal prep. So it's like all seed oil free, grass-fed meat. She'll cook meals for you. She charges a great price point as well. And even just having those meals ready to go. So it's like get out of the office like 6:30, heat up a meal, eat it, and then you're good to go. And also like when you just change your diet and your palate, especially with a lot of these animal-based foods, you get so much satiety from the fat that you rewire yourself where you're like, dude, I don't need to eat at 9 o'clock before bed. I eat at 7 or 6 and I'm good to go the rest of the night.
Yeah, I did the factor meals.
Yeah.
Which have been great. The convenience. Yeah. And also it's all quality proteins. And like, yeah, when you have like quality proteins and fats and, you know, I just feel like after you give your body a little time to digest, like I'm always really hungry, right?
Yeah.
But like when you have those quality fats and proteins and then you kind of like relax for a half hour, you realize like you're pretty satisfied.
Totally.
But then, and there's also not a price you can put on the convenience of having like made meals. Like it's a big expense, but man, I think in the long term, you actually save money because
You do.
if it's high quality, like you're not going to get so many snacks, you're not going to go out as often, but I can't recommend enough if people have the ability to do like pre-packaged or pre-made meals, like, man, it's so much easier.
Yeah. Again, a little bit higher price point, but these things are holistic assets that are going to make you better over time, make you a better person, generate you more income. So it really is an asset. Not to speak for you, Harry, but you've gotten big into the mouth tape too. That's a staple for your mouth.
Yeah, I've ran out of it recently, but it's huge.
Oh, we got more for you.
Yeah,
just restocked.
Yeah, I noticed. I mean, I mouth breathed during the night, so that was definitely causing my sleep to not be as good. And I wasn't wearing a wearable at the time when I started doing it, but I immediately noticed improved focus, energy levels the next day. So it's huge.
It's wild seeing some of the results like that people have. Like I have a friend Dika, and I think she's in her 50s, but she literally had to take a nap every single day at 2 to 3 o'clock p.m. every day, exhausted. Started mouth taping, hasn't taken a nap since.
Wow.
Like insane energy. And she's a high energy person.
Yeah.
Wow.
And there's been we get so many testimonials like that. It's wild. Like that was my experience. You know, I started taping my mouth probably 2 years ago. First night, Katie wasn't home. She came home late on a flight. I didn't tell her, didn't think about it. Walked in and I had mouth tape on. She was like, what is happening?
Yeah.
But I felt so much better. And so recently I was like, I want to see why I feel so much better. So I did 2 clinical sleep studies. I did one with tape, one without tape. I'm like, let's see what's going on. Right. And like you said, you've only slept as yourself, right? You only have your own perspective. So you don't really know if something's going on, because if something is going on, it's usually like gradual evolution, and you don't you can't make a huge perspective shift. And so when I put the tape on, I was like, I feel so much better. So I did these 2 sleep studies. When I didn't have the tape on, I had 86 breathing disturbances. So I stopped breathing 86 times. I was diagnosed with mild sleep apnea, recommended to be put on a CPAP, the whole thing.
Yeah.
I wore the tape. and I had 8 the entire night. The doc was like, this is perfect. Like, this is less than I see normally with someone that doesn't have sleep apnea. Slow wave sleep was through the roof. REM sleep was through the roof.
Just from taping your mouth.
Just from taping my mouth. But, you know, we all have different reasons, but you have to create that seal on the top of your mouth between your tongue in order to have efficient breathing through your nose. So whatever it may be, there's a lot of reasons like people think, but you know, it just ensures that's happening. And I think mouth tape for a lot of people don't realize that they're breathing through their mouth, and they probably aren't sleeping as well as they could, but you've always slept that way, right?
Yeah.
So how do I know any different?
Yeah.
Right.
And that's kind of how I was.
Yeah. Can you explain the breathing stuff a little bit more? Just like, why are we wired to breathe through our nose instead of our mouth?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that the biggest thing is just the nervous system. Like our nervous, your breathing is directly connected to your vagus nerve, which, you know, is connected to our diaphragms and runs through our heart, and it is literally a direct link to our nervous system, right? So if you're breathing, if your exhales are longer than your inhales, you're calming your nervous system down. So as soon as we start breathing through our mouth, it's hard to regulate our nervous system, which obviously in sleep, that's going to play a huge role. And the other thing is, you know, basically the air is prepared for our body to absorb it efficiently through our nose. Like, it's moisturized, it's warmed up, and we're able to intake more oxygen per volume. Like, obviously if you breathe through your mouth, you're going to get more volume of air. That's why intense stuff like we need it. But, you know, per volume, it's almost just making our body extremely efficient. And we've been talking about efficiency the whole time, but you know, it's allowing your body to get the most out of doing the least. And I think that's what's important when you're sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about, it sounds like 8 hours is an optimal time to be in bed. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, so, you know, it's in the scientific community, it's 7 hours is agreed upon as the minimum for like optimal function, which one is minimum does not mean optimal. Like, I think people immediately be like, okay, I got to get 7. That doesn't mean that's the best, but they've done a couple studies this year that, you know, have shown even like 8.5 is where most people
Interesting.
lie. Which is a lot.
That's a lot.
But I'm someone that, like, when I get 8, sometimes I'm like, I could still sleep more.
Keep going.
Like this morning, like we got in, I think, like I probably slept 8 hours, but I didn't like pop out of bed.
Yeah.
And I was like, I could do another 30 if I wanted to, you know?
30.
Yeah. But, I think, like, you know, everybody says like the whole listen to your body thing, but you know, if you're tired and you have the ability to sleep a little bit longer, I think that's fine. I think now there's a point of diminishing returns, and you shouldn't just be in bed all day. But you know, you might be a 9-hour person, and that's totally okay. As long as I think that's fine as long as then you're productive and you feel good and you wake up and you have energy in the morning. Like, if not, you know, there's a point where there's some negative health outcomes after a certain amount of sleep. But I think that's more related to lifestyle, what's going on during the day. So if you're 9 and you're like, I feel awesome when I get 9, like, very well could be the case that's how much you need.
Yeah. Is there a way to leverage data to know if you're like an 8 or 9 hour person, or is it more of just this intuitive thing of like, dude, do you feel good when you wake up, or you feel tired?
I think it's a little bit subjective. Like the studies they do, they usually bring someone into a lab, they let them get acclimated, and then they let them sleep as long as they want to.
Yeah.
And they have no contact to the outside world, light. They don't know what time it is, and they see how long they sleep. So it's tough to really get that number without doing that. But you know, I think if you're in the 8 to 9 range, the 7 to 9 range, and you feel great, I mean, things are probably in a good place for you. But the at-home sleep studies are like $200, and you can see if there's breathing disturbances or you know some you know, they're not the best out there, but they're super great just to see where you're at and just make sure nothing crazy is going on, and then get a baseline. So like, let's say everything's great, and then, you know, 10 years down the road, you're having, you know, some issues with sleep. You could redo it, and at least you have a baseline. It's kind of like blood work, where like you might as well check it to see where you're at, and if everything's good, okay, you have this baseline if something ever occurs.
Yeah.
Got it.
What's your thoughts on like an alarm clock? Because I feel like the best sleep I get is usually I'm woken up by the sun, like and like subtly wake up.
Me too. I love that. I think subtly, and this is just purely my own experience, but I think waking up more subtly is much better. Like, I think the less stress we can put ourselves under, the better. If you can wake up with the natural sunlight, that's awesome for a variety of reasons. But the intense alarms, I just can't see that being a positive. Of
There's
like
no
waking
way.
up in that stress state.
Reagan's alarm.
Oh, Apple has that one setting where it's like at least kind of like a more
The
gentle
gradual,
alarm.
that's-
The gradual
yeah.
is nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one's way better.
So
I
much
have
better.
that. My wife has like the like the most.
That one's brutal.
It sounds like there's like a marching band coming into our room.
Yeah.
My brother's been with us the past few days, and he has the worst alarm. It's like,
Dude.
I'm like, "Wait, bro, can you just not get out of bed?" Or
It's
like,
also
what's
like
the deal?
I feel like when people use that one, they also have it at like max volume. It's never like 50% volume.
No.
It's like I'm gonna blow my
Yeah.
eardrums out.
We got to make sure he gets to sleep before his Ironman too.
Yeah.
He's doing Ironman Florida on Saturday, so
In
Panama City.
Panama City.
my buddy's doing that.
No way.
My buddy Hayes is doing that.
Hayes.
Missy Franklin's husband.
Okay, no way. I'm gonna be down there. I'm driving down.
Are
Today.
you?
Yeah.
Wow, what a small world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's insane.
I'll
We
keep
were
an eye
gonna
out for
go.
him.
Like, so we were gonna go try to root him on, but Katie's running New York City Marathon Sunday. So.
Oh, yeah,
Nice.
it's the same weekend. Gotcha.
So we're talking time in bed, mouth tape you really like. Ideally, if you can wake up with natural sunlight, that's huge. What about, wearables, eye masks,
Yeah.
mattresses?
Yeah.
What's your
Well,
perspective
I'm a huge
on that
eye
stuff?
mask. I mean, we
Yeah.
make eye masks, but regardless, I think eye masks are like the most underutilized sleep tool, especially for like college kids, but anyone really,
Mm-hmm.
anyone I would say that's on their phone a lot, because the problem is the eye mask, and the reason I don't think they get as much attention, one, it's been positioned as this like kind of beauty luxury
Yeah.
product. And that's kind of like what the narrative we're trying to change is like ours are like, listen, if you're going to be a high performer, like one, you need to take sleep seriously, and that's okay. And these products aren't fluffy. Like they're made to help you kick ass.
Yeah.
Like that's the goal. And so with the eye mask, it's like light has a massive impact on sleep, as you know. So if you're traveling a lot, just having a relatively cheap option to be able to control the light and not have to worry about blackout shades and all these different things, especially for an athlete, that's a huge value. And people don't realize like how inconsistent different places can be. But the biggest value is the psychological value. Like it's such a trigger to fall asleep. And I've had so many people that, I've had great friends that are like, I got an eye mask to support you, but I literally can't sleep without it. Like the Super Coffee Brothers are all about it, and they never wore masks in their life because it's like it's a psychological trigger. And I think a lot of people, they're on their phone or they're watching TV and they just do that stuff until they fall asleep, but there's never a point where they fully commit mentally to like, okay, it is time for rest.
Yeah.
And that's what the eye mask forces you to do. So especially with college kids, like they're on Snapchat till 1:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
Right.
But when you commit and you put the mask on, that all goes away, and it almost like calms your mind because you can't do anything else.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that trigger is very valuable. But in studies, like they compare like not wearing a mask to wearing a mask, and it's more about that habit. It's not the actual like physiological changes. It's not necessarily the light or anything to do with the mask. It's everything to do with the mindset and the psychology.
What about some of these other wearables like
Yeah.
the Whoops and
Yeah.
Oura Rings out there? Like I feel like part of me loves them. Like I've used Whoop before. The other part of me is like I feel like I over-index sometimes
Definitely.
to like the data. So I'm curious your take.
I mean,
on
I
it.
think that, there's all this good stuff on sleep and we're learning so much, but it's almost like a detriment to some people. Like it's a blessing and a curse because the more you think about sleep, the worse you're going to sleep.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's a balance of like, I think that with all the wearables, the day-to-day data isn't really useful. With athletes, a lot of times around competition, Whoop has a feature where you can turn off, like you can't see it, like you hide it. And I think that people get way too caught up on like, okay, where am I at today? When the value comes in like the monthly reports and the yearly reports, you can see what are your trends over time, what's your consistency, how do big life changes affect certain aspects of sleep and recovery. That's super valuable. But for you to wake up and let a number dictate how you feel that day, like that's not going to be useful.
Yeah.
And I think that people get so into that and so caught up in it. And then at night they start to stress themselves out because they know how important sleep is and they're worried about their recovery score, and then they can't sleep. And all they think about is not being able to sleep, and it just spirals out of control. So I think that they're amazing for long-term behavior changes and consistency and checking up on those. But I think day to day, if I look at it day to day,
Right.
like what benefit comes from that as
Right.
opposed to a week, maybe that's a
Yeah.
great thing. And the other thing people don't realize, like your wake time and bedtime, by far of all this stuff, the consistency of those two things is the number one tip. Like you cannot, it trumps everything 10 times compared to the other stuff.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like all this other stuff is great, like the cool room, the light in the morning, all this stuff. But like that consistency is not even in the same ballpark.
So just getting to bed at the same time.
Staying within 30 minutes of a wake time and bedtime every single day will have exponential gains on your health, because every 5 minutes outside of that 30-minute range, you can almost predictably measure how much it's going to impact your resting heart rate, your HRV, your nervous system. Like things just start to get out of control and has a really negative impact on your health outside that 30-minute mark. So if you can be consistent, if you can do one thing, that consistency will have the biggest impact.
Again, simple, not sexy things.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that people, when they hear that, they think like, oh, that's so I fall asleep. I can fall asleep and I'm not tired and I wake up in the morning. No, it's like physiologically changing your body when you don't do that.
What's your go-to bedtime and wake-up time?
I usually like to, well, so I always say this. I actually have a TV in my room. I wear blue light blocking glasses sometimes, but me and Katie, like we don't watch a lot of TV, and sometimes we're busy. So that's something where is it the best decision for my sleep? Probably not, but relationships and social connection, that's the number one tool to longevity. There's been study after study. Like that is the most important part of living a long, healthy life. So we'll always like watch a show or something at night, and I really value that time. I value that half hour. So like that's a non-negotiable. So I do watch TV, but I like to get in bed at 9, probably 9:30 if I'm being realistic. I'm probably asleep by like 10:15, and then I like to wake up. I usually wake up at like 6:30, depending. So I get a pretty good chunk of time, but
Nice.
We're trying to have kids, so I think that will change soon.
Yeah. What kind of shows are you guys digging into right now?
It's tough for me because I'm not like, I have a hard time committing to shows.
Yeah.
Like it's a big commitment to like
It's
get into
huge.
it. So we watched White Lotus recently, which was really good. Still haven't watched, Yellowstone, which everybody's like, oh my God.
Everyone's obsessed with
Did
Yellowstone.
you guys watch Yellowstone?
No.
I don't know. I just have I also like comedies because like if I'm only gonna watch TV for like a half hour, 45 minutes, I want to be like happy about it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Like I'm not trying to be stressed out.
Yeah.
I liked Ozark though,
Ozark was amazing.
but intense.
Yeah. And my problem is like when I'm Harry saw this firsthand. When I watch a show, I need to like obsessively finish it as fast as
you're
possible.
like Katie. Yeah, she just hammers it.
So I was hammering Ozark. Did you ever get into Succession?
No,
It's insane. It's one of the best shows I've ever
I need
seen.
to watch that.
But-
I mean, Entourage was the perfect show.
The perfect
yeah.
show.
Like, cause it was like
Yeah.
short. It was so fun, lighthearted. There was like enough of a plot and stuff, but like you're just excited to watch it. I feel like I haven't found a show like that since Entourage.
I don't know if it exists.
It was one of one.
I love I love like mafia shows or like mafia movies. I feel like that's like my show
that's your bread and
vice.
butter.
Yeah.
For sure.
Are you a big Godfather guy?
I like The Godfather. I mean, Sopranos is definitely, that's my show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ballers was kind of similar to Entourage, and then it fell off.
Oh, dude,
Oh,
the idea of it was
yeah,
like
it had so much potential.
It was hard because like I think The Rock was like trying to play this like tough, like slick guy, and like he's a super nice guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like and like kind of laid back. So I think it just like it didn't feel like him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that show had so much potential.
So much potential. Yeah, the first season was pretty good, and then it fell off. But I like what you were saying with Katie of like you just have these non-negotiables, and you're outweighing the benefit that you're going to get by doing that versus like maybe these marginal improvements that you would get for a night of sleep. And I think that stuff's important too.
Yeah, I think that people have to keep in mind, like I said, your relationships have to be like front and center.
Yeah.
Right. So when your health goals and these little tweaks and hacks, like when those start to cut into your ability to have relationships, it's probably not worth it.
Right.
Like I said, consistency in wake time and bedtime is really important. But if you have a group of friends that you really care about and they're going to stay out till 11 o'clock, like that's a time where you should cut corners and not stay home and be a hermit. So
Right.
I think some people just get so obsessed with health and wellness that they don't realize the healthiest thing you can do is care about people and be around people that you love. And as soon as it starts taking away from that, you're actually hurting your health.
Yeah.
Which it doesn't feel that way. It's really
Yeah.
hard to like fully believe that, but like that's what the science shows.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people in the health and wellness space feel enslaved to like their routines and stuff. It's like it's kind of isolating.
Yeah, like your VO2 max compared to how much you care about people and how deeply you're connected to people. That won't even, that doesn't hold a light to that. I mean, it's actually amazing when you look at the blue zone. Just every longevity thing that is able to wrap in social connections, it always wins. And the other thing is too is like, who cares if you live to be 100 and you're super healthy and fit and can run if you have no one around you that you care about? Exactly. Like, what's the point? Like, the quality of life, like that's what life's about. It's about, connecting with people. And I don't understand when that obsession outweighs the social side.
Yeah, those are kind of the broad strokes I like to make around health too, where it's so easy to get lost in the data. But
so easy.
If you can just have the right framework, like you'll go so far.
Yeah, it is hard though, because the data is so fun and there's so much stuff out there and there's all these learnings. But at the end of the day, like you were talking about, like, well, when you were talking about having all this success and the 3 businesses and all this stuff, it's like that's great, and you're probably on a path to have an unbelievably successful career. But like, what if you feel like shit when you're 55 years old and you have all this money from all these businesses? What's it even matter? So I think that's the other thing with sleep is like there's a lot of the stuff is long-term outcomes. It's not, we talk about the day-to-day and how to feel as good as you possibly can, but most of the data is like 10, 20, 30-year effects. So think about it that way too. It's like you're building these empires, but for what? For what? You want to be around and have a high quality of life to enjoy it. Yeah. And if you're not taking care of yourself now, it's not even going to be worth it.
Yeah, like almost reverse engineering the end goals. We had Mark Sisson on the podcast a couple months ago, and it was really inspiring just hearing him give advice at like 70 years old, so much success. And one of the things he said is, he goes, I wholeheartely believe you can build an incredible business and also have a great quality of life and do the things that you love throughout that process too.
I think so too. Like, I don't think it has to be these 100-hour work weeks. I think, like I said, if you're efficient, you get the right people around you. I think if you allocate funds to things that build a foundation that's able to be scalable, and you get people around. I was talking about this with my partner, Jake. It's like when you can offload tasks to people that you're excited to have do these tasks that are better than you, and you can really lay a foundation, like I think you really can have a high quality of life. But I think it's also hard because in the beginning, a lot of people want control, and also like obviously the financial side of things is tough. But I think thinking about like if you're going to scale this up and having quality of life be a variable in that thought process, I think it's doable. But I think a lot of people just they don't think about that as a priority. So it's just like, how can I race to this finish line? And just everything else falls to the wayside. I think it's possible to do both. And I think a lot of times doing both actually, from a long-term perspective, probably results in a better outcome.
Yeah. Delegation is massive, and it's not easy to do because I think there's the ego associated with like, well, I could just probably do this better than anyone else could do it. But you'd be amazed that when you give someone more responsibility, most times if they're a good person and a good talented, they'll like rise up. Where it's like if you have them play down, they'll play down at their competition.
Yeah, it's like let people prove you right. Yeah, it's well, they've done studies on kids, and like when you tell them they're going to get an A, or you basically use the language that they're going to do really well, they do really well. And then if you say like you're going to get a C or D and you use language that they're not going to do that well, like hopefully you can pass, they live up to those expectations. So I think same thing with employees. Like, usually when you believe in somebody, like they're gonna do good things. Yeah, it's hard. I think the other thing with delegation, it's hard is like the upfront task of like offloading it also overwhelms people. They're like, it's going to take so much work to explain how I do it and this, and then you're like, I'm just not going to do it. But then like as business scales, you're like, you really put yourself in a bad spot because it gets harder and harder every day that goes on that you don't shift that responsibility.
Yeah.
So true.
It's that upfront investment for the long-term reward for sure.
It's hard.
So you've talked about your wife, Katie, a few times. She's a stud. She's Olympic medalist swimmer.
Yeah. I mean, she was a world record holder. I mean, at one point was probably the best swimmer in the world. And she's a savage for sure.
Yeah. As her husband, what are some of the biggest things that you've personally learned from her?
Man, a lot. I think the biggest thing I've learned from her it's inspiring to watch her. What's the word I'm looking for? It's inspiring to watch her initiative and her ability to literally run through any wall to achieve a goal. Like, I've never seen someone be able to be like, okay, this is what I'm trying to do. I don't care what happens. Like, I'm going to get there. If I have to, I don't care who I have to call. I don't care how uncomfortable I am. I don't care what amount of effort it takes. Like, she'll do anything to accomplish that goal. And I think that's very rare. And I think that people often underestimate how many hurdles they can jump to get something done. And they give up very early. But when you're like laser focused, like you can overcome just about anything. And I've never seen someone be able to do that as well as her.
Wow.
I mean, but also like we always talked about like in football, like putting your face in the fan, like when we were going to hit somebody, like it's going to hurt. It's going to suck. It's like putting a face in your fan. And she's able to do that, which it's not going to be fun. You're going to be beat up by the time you get to that goal. But like, you can do it, and you can withstand a lot, and you know we can overcome a lot. So it's been cool to see. It's inspiring to see her when she does set a goal, just to execute.
There's something about that swimmer's mind that is ridiculously
crazy,
driven, and also the balance of. I think the like pain threshold is just their pain threshold is so high.
Oh yeah,
for getting up early, doing crazy amounts of work in the pool.
I didn't know anything about the swimming culture, but. I mean, they swim every day, like Christmas Day sometimes. I mean, it's wild. And so like, that mindset is incredible. And I think that, you know, there's obviously different types of swimmers, but you know, you're literally just swimming like in there's times and you're just crushing yourself in the exact thing. There's parts of baseball and football that are like fun, like playing catch, hitting BP, you know, like warm. There's certain parts that are enjoyable. Like, it's literally swimming the whole time. There's not a part where you're like, oh my gosh, this is so much fun. I mean, the whole thing, I'm just like, I don't know. I literally don't know how you do it. So, and the thing is with her, it's like, I don't think she loves swimming. I think she loves winning. And I think she loves being the best. And that was just the vehicle to do that.
That's really interesting.
Like, she doesn't swim at all now.
Anymore. She's done. Yeah.
And there's some people that love the water and it's, you know, it's like their meditation. But no, I think that she just, you know, she was like, I'm good at this. Like, I want to go after it. I want to go to the Olympics. And that was the vehicle to get there.
And she did the damn thing. So I remember when Jesse Itzler signed up for Ultraman, I think you guys had like stayed with him or something like that. And she was teaching him how to swim. Yeah. And I just remember watching her like swim in the pool. And it took her like 5 strokes to like get to the other side of the pool. I've never seen someone push water like that when they're swimming.
Yeah, the efficiency is wild to watch. When you're around somebody that's like a really good swimmer, it's so smooth. Wow. You don't realize it when you watch it like on TV because they're going really fast and they're around other good people. But like when you watch it head to head, like Jesse and her, you're like, oh, this is a different thing. Yeah. Actually, it was funny. Like this morning, I asked her, I don't know why this came up. She was doing something like she didn't really want to do, and she was like, I wish we could switch places. And I was like, what would be the first thing you would do if you were me? Yeah. And I was like, if I were you, I'd probably go to a pool and just feel like what it feels like to swim because it looks so smooth. I don't even know what that would feel like. Yeah. So, yeah.
So you mentioned fatherhood is around the corner for you. What has you most excited for that?
Well, we'll see. We're doing our best. You know, we're putting our efforts in every day. So, oh man, I don't know if I've even really thought that through, but I'm a very emotional being, and I think it'll be just even after getting a dog, just the attachment. But I think it'll just be so fun to be supportive and just like cultivate growth, and you know, I'm excited for the perspective of like having someone else rely on you. I think it's really powerful, and I really haven't thought about that too much because everything everyone says is like you have no idea until it actually happens. Like you can't even like wrap your head around how much it means. So anytime you get an opportunity to have something that you care about that much, it's like the best thing in the world. So I'm just excited to see how it goes.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing to enter that next phase of life. And also, you and Katie have so much collective wisdom from your athletic pursuits and all the other endeavors. It's going to be really special to pass that on to your kids.
It should be fun. Yeah, everyone's expecting high things from an athletic perspective. But it's funny though, because like I think we'll both be pretty laid back with like sports. Like our parents were both not like pressuring us into stuff. Like supportive. Like my parents were amazing. Anytime I needed new cleats or like, they would do their best to like provide everything. But like, we're not going to be like pushing them into stuff. Our thing is just like, you have to do something and a lot of stuff. We want you to do a lot of stuff, be on teams, try new things. It doesn't have to be even sports, but just experience things and be around people. But we're definitely not going to be like the crazy, intense parents, because you can't force kids to be driven like that. I think so many parents are like, we'll get asked like, what did your parents do to make you so driven? And I'm like, the fact that you're asking that, like, this isn't going to work out. They're, you give them an environment to enjoy things and find out what they're passionate about, but like they have to find that. You're not going to force that to happen.
Right.
I think other than providing opportunities, like there's nothing you can do. You have to let those things play out.
Right. Well, we appreciate you coming on the show. Where can people find you?
I'm on Instagram mostly. Instagram, I have TikTok, but I have a website. But and then just dreamrecovery.io is all our products.
Yeah.
We have a lot of exciting stuff coming out over the next year, probably. Like we'll have a whole portfolio of like sleep support products. So like just kind of getting started in that part.
Nice. You brought us some goodies outside, some masks and some tape. Yeah. I told you the first care package, some idiot stole the care package out of the mailbox.
That guy's super smart.
He's actually really smart.
Dude, that's the
he was like, what do we
got
got here?
Yeah, he's like, he's probably so disappointed. He's like, I don't even know what this is. It's like Band-Aids or like, what is this? Could you imagine stealing something? That's like your worst nightmare.
Oh yeah, and it's just,
you're hoping it's like an iPhone.
Yeah, it's just masks.
Just mouth tape. You're like, what is this?
Part 2, we're just going to put mouth tape on and just sign to each other the whole podcast. What do you think?
Yeah.
Dude, that'd be a challenge.
In the sauna?
For sure.
Yeah. Well, dude, it was great to finally meet you. Appreciate you doing this, and we'll see you next week at HPLT. It'll be a great weekend.
Sounds good, dude.
Cool. Thanks,
Sweet.
Todd.
Thanks, Todd.